We'll call this meeting to order at 9:30, and I will turn it over to Don for a roll call.
Ron Anthony.
Here.
Julia Tella.
Here.
Kim Britt. Amber Brown. Molly Bruner.
Here.
Carter Deers. Jessica Fraulich. Michelle Frisbee.
Here.
Cami Gens.
Here.
Kevin Glass.
Here.
Nicholas Henderson. You having problems with your?
Might want to say
I see you there. Corey Cohen.
Here.
Don Lanoy.
Here.
Marlon Mazzaros.
Present.
Kelly Mitchell.
Here.
Kurt Mortensen.
Here.
Becca Muscat. John Priam.
Here.
Toby Stevens. Lane Sutherland.
Here.
Rhonda Van Schoonhoven.
Here.
Jennifer Verdea. Barb Weckman-Brecky. Okay.
All right.
Amber Brown is here. Sorry, I jumped on late.
No problem. I've got you.
Thank you.
And Becca's on there as well.
Becca's on? Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We were saying here that it's been a little bit since we didn't have some meetings. So we will move into approval of the agenda and the minutes. And so what I do see, Don, is just some misspellings on names that are attendance on the minutes. My name and Barb Weckman-Brecky's, just for correction on that. Otherwise, do I have a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Kurt. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Kelly. Second, is there any other discussion on either the agenda or the minutes? Hearing none. We'll move to pass those.
Ron Anthony.
Aye.
Julia Tella.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Molly Bruner.
Aye.
Michelle Frisbee.
Very yes.
Cami Gens.
Aye.
Kevin Glass.
Aye.
Nicholas Henderson.
Aye.
Corey Cohen.
Aye.
Don Lanoy.
Aye.
Marlon Mazzaros.
Yes.
Kelly Mitchell.
Yes.
Kurt Mortensen.
Aye.
Becca Muscat.
She is in the attendees section.
Oh, sorry. Let me take care of that right now. Okay.
Okay, I'm
Becca?
saying aye. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great.
John Priam,
Aye.
Lane Sutherland,
Aye.
Rhonda Van Schoenhoven. And the motion passes.
All right, thank you.
All right, so the first substantive item that we have on the agenda today is the IPV policy. And I show that Tracy Green and Tim Shamel were going to present. It looks to me like Tim is in the attendee list.
Tim, you should be able to unmute now.
Tim, can you hear us?
I can.
Are you the one presenting today on the IPV policy?
Well, I was here to support Tracy, so that's, but I can do my best. Some interesting kind of developments as we've gotten some feedback prior to today. It looks like we may have got ahead of ourselves a little bit within the policy. As you all can see in section C, determining appropriateness for reunification, it states agents must determine case appropriateness by balancing victim requests and needs against outcomes of approved IPV risk and lethality tools. Sounds like those lethality tools and risk assessments have not been developed or approved in CSAC policy. So it looks like we'll have to revamp some of that language within the policy. It's also looking like under the last page, training proposed. Oh, it doesn't have that one listed. It's kind of a, so you guys don't have that page on your policy?
We have a separate page that was submitted that has what looks like potentially alternative language options. So I'm not sure what the intent was there.
Yeah, that page is,
Well, there it is. It's up on the screen now. I'm not sure if you can see that, Tim.
yep. Yeah, the paragraph in question was all agents and caseworkers working with domestic violence or intimate partner violence cases shall complete IPV or approved IPV specific training within 1 year of assignment to IPV cases. That language also should be cleaned up and to provide more clarity on what we are specifically talking about there. I know Jennifer Waindell offered some trainings recently. I think that was, again, an outlook instead of specifically what would be offered and providing some clarity in that language as well. So I guess the proposal is that we go back and look at these two specific areas and provide some more clarity and come back to this group.
So I think we also might have some feedback from the different organizations and from CSAC members. So I'm wondering, Tim, if we could kind of air some of that as well so that it could all be potentially worked on at the same time. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we, if you wouldn't mind, Don, if you could put the main policy back up. maybe we could kind of scroll through it, and if there were things that people had some questions or input feedback about, maybe we could talk about that today. So could you start at the very top, Dawn? So kind of what I'd like to do is kind of scroll through, maybe we just kind of scroll through sort of section by section, and I'll just ask members if there was anything in the particular sections that they wanted to talk about. And to kick that off so that you have an understanding of what I'm trying to get at. On this very first page for me, when I was reading the policy, in the applicability section, there's that piece in the third paragraph there that says this policy applies to cases involving reunification between a client and victim, and then also when a client wants to get engaged in a new intimate partner relationship. And my concern there was that sounds like policy to me rather than applicability. So it felt out of place, like it should be moved down into, maybe I was toying around with options, and I was thinking it could go down into it could be sort of like a beginning part to the policy, which would also solve A being a long sentence, a long bolded sentence instead of a title. But so that's one thing that I don't know, what if other folks think about that? Am I just kind of creative? Like, it feels like a lot to be in the applicability section. Okay, so that section we potentially want to move. Is there anything else on this page that people sort of called out or wanted to talk about? Corey? And not officially part of the committee, but you're at the table, so I'd love to hear what you have to say. That's all right.
I think he is, as far as the EVP
Oh,
chair.
are you? Are
Yes.
you? Oh, no, I'm so
The new
sorry. You
EVP chair.
are.
He is official.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we didn't, just everybody, we kind of forgot that we have 2 new members today that we didn't really call out. So Corey Mavis Rowe is here now
Corey
as the
Cohan.
EV chair. Corey Cohan, I'm doing the wrong Corey too. You'd think I'd have a new baby at home or something. Corey Cohan is the new chair of the EVP Advisory Committee. So he's serving in that role on the committee. And then Rhonda Van Schoenhoven is here as the CPO representative replacing Tracy Green. So welcome.
Tracy Green is now on.
Oh, awesome. Great. Corey,
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair. Just in the applicability section, something that came to my attention was it references second paragraph to all staff working with clients being released from incarceration. And I'm assuming that that is referring to individuals released from prison incarceration versus
Oh.
local jails. I'm assuming that that's the intent there. And then also the paragraph, in the first paragraph of applicability, it references all community supervision agents. But then in the second paragraph, it talks about all staff. So just, should we have some consistency there between what are we referring to in terms of staff? Maybe it's assumed, maybe it's fine, but I just wanted to clarify that language as well.
Yeah, I think we did go back and forth on that last time, and because the sort of the issue that we're trying to get at is some case managers in DOC facilities might be the ones who first get this information, and then they need to relay it to the agent so the agent can then do the next pieces. And so I think that's why the language gets weird and murky.
Okay.
But
No, it's fine.
It's
fine.
But it's fair. It's a fair question. So I think that's how they solve it. It's by being generic there. All right. But the prison calling out that we're talking about DOC incarceration, not jails, is makes a valid point. All right. Other anything else on this page or this section? All right, I think we can go down into, then at the bottom of this page is procedures. So you could scroll down to A in the procedures section. Or on my version, it's the bottom of the page. It might be the top of your page. So, just for, number A is really a sentence. Letter A there is really a sentence. So just format wise, we would need a title and then that becomes like the text underneath it. But that section is probably where in that section, I think we could insert that piece that I didn't think belonged in the applicability section. So, Tim and Tracy, I can send you a recommendation for how to fit that in there. But I think that's where that could go. All right, other items in this A or B, those are kind of big. Do you have anything in there? All right, anything in, did you have anything, Kurt?
Well,
You wanted to?
So in B, eligibility, number 2, subparagraph 2, it just seems like maybe the language could be a little tighter, but I don't know if that's in this setting or if that happens down the road. So that just.
I think we could make that recommendation here. Do you have a recommendation?
Well, I mean, if we're looking at eligibility criteria, language, no protective order exists that prohibits contact with the client would be what's being said there, right?
Mm.
And it is,
So it's a little.
it just seems kind of
Are you
a
in
long way
like-
around
yeah,
to
yeah,
get to that point, but I just throw that for consideration, that's all.
So are you in 2 or 3 when you're saying?
2.
2.
I mean,
Are you suggesting we kind of reverse that by saying the client is not eligible for reunification if there's a protective order?
well,
Am I following?
it's eligibility criteria. And in order to be eligible, there needs to be no protective order existing that prohibits contact, right? Is that the message that's being conveyed there?
Yes.
So Tracy,
can it
he's
be just said
considering
that way?
flipping the language so it simply says there are no active protective orders in place that stipulate no contact with the client. Is that correct, Kurt?
Yeah. I mean, isn't that the thrust of that paragraph?
Okay.
I think what's weird, now I'll wordsmith. This section's trying to do a couple of things, not just set the eligibility
So
criteria.
so
I think
maybe I'm limited in my view there.
No, I think that the setup of the section doesn't, it might need a little more wordsmithing because number 1 is like the victim has to ask for it,
Right.
right? Number 2 is there can't be a protective order.
Right.
Number 3 is, I don't know, there's a.
How do you check for the protective order?
Yeah, there can't be how to check for, so it's like, it's kind of doing more than just saying the criteria for
It is.
eligibility.
So however that
So,
can best be handled, but
yeah. So it might need like more edits than that too.
Might just need another section. You might have eligibility and then you have some of these other things. Because even number 4 is, and then you need to get a release.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like after they're eligible and then you need to get a release. So I think there is like
Right.
another B.5,
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
right? To like
Yeah.
split those 2 concepts up. I think that might help
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, so like 1 and 2 could be eligibility.
Yeah.
They could be together in a section to be
Right.
like, to be eligible for reunification. 1, the victim must request it. 2, there must not be a protective order.
And then you.
Then you go into 2,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
check for protective order, do this. Number 4, if, or is the ROI an eligibility factor? I don't know.
Well, or it says you must have a ROI. And then you could have a note, whatever, a note or something that says if refused, no longer becomes applicable or eligible or something. Yeah, just, I think that working through that would make it flow better, for sure.
Cami.
What if you did what you guys were saying, have one, and then which is the reunification process must be victim driven, and then 1A is actually 3A, and then you have 2, which is no protective order, and then you have 2A, which would actually be where 3B is now. It tells you how to do that, and then number 3 is the ROI, and ROI must also be in place. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, and then 1 and 2 would have an A under it, which covers what's in number 3. Did that make any sense? So one reunification process must be driven by the victim, just as it's written now. And then 1A would be, if applicable, the staff receives a request from the victim regarding reunification, and that piece there. And then number 2 is as written, and 2A would be under 3, which is agent must confirm there's no active criminal, civil, et cetera, and then make number 4 and number 3.
I almost tracked that, Cami. We also are drawing in the front page under applicability into the section 2, that section that policy applies. We have to kind of insert that as well.
Well, that's under A though, correct?
Correct. Oh, that's what you meant. Okay.
I'm just talking about number B,
Got it.
letter B.
It sounds like you're on the right track. I'm wondering if you could take notes on that and provide that to Tracy and Tim, because it does sound like you're hitting the mark, but I didn't catch all of it.
I think I have notes on it, Cami. I can take it from here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for thinking that out loud with us. I appreciate it. Okay. I think that addresses some of the things in B. Is there anything for C?
I just want to, thanks Tim for calling out some of the discussions that we're having around the approved IPV risk and lethality tools. So in terms of though timing and coming back here, I know that's a body of work that needs to be done, is what are those tools? Are those recommendations at some point that do come back to CSAC? Is that going to take a much longer time than what we want in terms of this policy passing? Meaning, do we keep this out until we're ready to, again, propose what those actual tools are, and if those go into our risk assessment policy, and then we would need to update this. And so I understand that we want to use them, need to be using them, and we don't have clarity on exactly what those tools are. So I just, in terms of bringing that back to the group, I don't know if it's about this policy and trying to get that language in now. I guess I'm asking this group, is this something that just is a to-do list, and we keep that out of the next version? Is one of my questions or discussion items.
Yeah, I don't see that those tools are going to be developed anytime soon. So we'll have to look at how do we remove those from the policy at this time until they are created, and then we can have it inserted at a later date. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. Like if I don't think the policy should reference tools that don't exist. I think there's a lot that this policy does even without those tools, and it would be important to move forward with that much.
Yeah. In the risk assessment policy, when we're talking about, trailer tools and other things, it is encouraged, and it's encouraged to, if at agency level, choose tools that are above a certain area under the curve for validity. And so, so we have those things in place if people want to choose things, right? Use things that I know do exist out there. But in terms of just like this particular purpose or calling out, in this particular policy, we don't have a list of approved IPV tools yet. And so I'm thinking that other risk assessment policy helps us, at least gives us some guidance to do things in the meantime.
Yeah. Okay, so that piece, so that's really, that was the issue with C. All right, and so so you're already talking about just taking that language out for now. What about D? Or E, anything else that we should be calling attention to in those areas? Well, D, let's just stay with D, because then we have to ask the question about the training.
Well, this D also has like number 1, victim-centered reunification training, standardized. So I think it falls into the same bucket as just overall training conversation. And the, and that additional language there as well. Because we're talking about, Tim and Tracy, we're talking about, so we know that there's a training that people have taken. It's very good, by the way, and it's, developed by your group. And so again, even like from a MACAC perspective, support it. Have heard nothing besides, again, good things from staff across the board on this. And yet we're here at a policy level. We don't necessarily have that as, I think the big question is, what is the right word? Well, it's you're using the word standardized or approved by who? Like, CSAC hasn't done that. It's not who, where does it belong? Does it belong then at this academy? Who's responsible for training it? So it's kind of like the authority behind it is unclear, I guess. And then capacity for that, if it's even for the sake of argument, let's say it's that particular training that we've had recently, and we're gonna memorialize that as our standardized training. Who's responsible for making sure we offer enough, that we have enough trainers in it, and what is the cost of that? And I mean, there's a lot of questions on just the ability, even for the group, the subgroup of the domestic violence subgroup, to be able to do that statewide. So I guess there's so many questions, I guess, in this bucket of the training. We don't want, it's very, very important, but are we ready to say that, applicable staff shall be completing this training when there's so many questions about, I guess, that, starting with the approval and making it standardized at the state level?
Did everyone reference my notes that I had also included when I sent off the policy along with my training recommendation, the amendments for training? Did people see that?
We weren't sure. I wasn't sure what that was.
So
we
that
have
was
it,
the
yes.
committee's, that is the committee's new proposed language. And then I also included, I don't think it's in the policy, but I had some notes that I included that the Domestic Violence Steering Committee has created a training work group with the following goals for 2026. 1, to map current available IPV trainings for agents in Minnesota, to review the available trainings for appropriateness or fit, including identifying gaps in current training statewide, develop some best practices and criteria for training, and build out training infrastructure for long-term sustainability. So that is what the DVS Steering Committee has committed to for 2026 work group goals.
So, which is great. I don't see those in the, are they in the packet? I did see those somewhere, Tracy, maybe it.
I don't remember seeing them.
Okay. So to me, those are, thank you. And thank you to the DVS Steering Committee for taking that on as your work for this next year. Since that work isn't done, I guess what I'm saying is that to have in policy language that we shall complete this training then is too premature. And so kind of like the assessment tools, when we don't have those yet, I'm wondering if that work needs to be done and brought back as like, here's the actual curriculum that we're asking for to be approved first. And then here is the plan for what that looks like. Who's going to do it? How is it done? How do we have enough, all the things that you just talked about you're going to work on? being brought back to CSEC to see if, again, we can support that plan, and then we can shift policy to support it. I think that this language is getting before the finalization of some of those questions being answered.
So do you want to remove training from the policy?
Or that it's not shall and must, that it's encouraged, or it's, I don't know. Like, this is where I was like out to the group. What do people think?
I'm wondering if we can deal with that more in the effective date of the policy. Like, you know, it's gonna take a little time to get it on the agenda at DOC for approval, and then we can also recommend an effective date. And so I just wonder if we're able to set a date out there a little ways. If we could just deal with it that way, that we'll make the assumption that they're going to be ready to go. Because it just feels like there is a training out there that most agents have been through, or a lot of agents have been through. This doesn't even require every agent in the field to go through the training. So it's a smaller ask. It's just people who are working with clients that meet these criteria. So I don't know. I feel like we have enough in place to move forward with this if we could.
I would respectfully disagree, I guess. And the reason I say that is because we don't do that with any policies. It's just hope for the best and set an effective date on any other topic. So I think that it's not even for, I think, MACAC or me so much on the like content of it. It's who's responsible to provide that. And so if that's not decided and really thought through, is the DOC going to, again, put that in academy? Is that going to be like, where does it belong? Where the kind of owner of making sure that we have the ability to do that happens, and that it doesn't fall to, for instance, counties to find trainers and to get trainers, you know, especially for bigger organizations. I just think there's too many questions to say we hope that will happen, in my opinion.
But it has happened.
Because we have a lot of great people that are willing to step up as trainers and do it.
I think that's going to be the way that the world is for quite a long time. Like we don't get funding or the full responsibility to do training in the state. Every agency has to work together to make training happen. I just don't see that changing anytime soon.
So my suggestion is on D for number one, just remove number one because we talk about it in E, the training portion. And maybe a problem solver workaround is within their first year of employment, when available, all applicable. So then you have that one available. So if it's not there, it's not there. But if it's there, then these staff should be getting trained in it.
So one thing I could add to the discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, is Nikki's talked about creating a online video training. But again, this group didn't know that, but I think the training was proposed to be an online video training that staff could watch online that basically mimicked what people attended in person for the IPV reunification principles. So it was more available and more doable capacity-wise across the state. But again, this group didn't know that, and I don't know if the clarity was provided.
So yeah, as Liz noted in the comments, the virtual standardized training is going to be completed by the end of the month, and that is going to what the D reference would be, is that record training. So that would be something that would be able to be linked and watched. But as I noted, the DVS steering committee is also looking at putting how we give more direction on what other trainings out there and what we recommend would be included in that training if you choose not to attend this virtual option or some other future programs that are presented.
I think that's really promising, and I think it sounds like we have some work to do in this policy anyways, and so I would, if that's the case, and this is an online training standardized that is approved by CSAC, then that makes a world of difference for sure. And
So-
we're not ready to approve today anyway, so we're not we can wait to see how that looks and what that looks like, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we could, there could be some more edits to the policy. And then hopefully we could have some information about that brought forward at our next meeting or soon. I think that's a good approach, and I kind of like your, offer too of the one available, right? Like there might not be training available, and I don't know.
The only other, I guess, comment I would make is that whatever that is called, so like this standardized training, if it's called IPV unification training, like capital letters, what I'm saying is like, what is it that we're saying you have to do instead of approved? It seems vague, right? Like, what are we actually saying you need within your first year? So like, we know LSCMI is a thing, it's a tool. So all I'm suggesting is whatever we end up like naming it, then we name it, and then we suggest that in policies, we're really clear about what it is that we're saying must or shall to. And like having a online training that's not a cost and people can do that is obviously very feasible. So I just want kind of like the capital letter, what is it that we're approving when we go forward?
Tracy? Did you have another comment, Tracy?
No.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I'd love for the IPV, the folks to give us a recommendation on that. Because I also heard you saying that there might be other trainings out there that would also qualify. So I'm trying to figure out how we work that in, if that's, if there's another option, like there may be more than one option. So that's what I was.
And
struggling.
we've also been told Hennepin County has their own training, so we're trying to give options and resources out there. Again, we were directed to put this policy together, so
I know,
we're
I'm
trying our
sorry,
best.
Tracy. You guys are doing great. I wonder if what is it criteria that you're looking for? Like a training that might include these things? Like with that?
Well, yeah, maybe it's again, I'm also trying to carry forward some different perspectives, not just mine. So I'm trying to synthesize all this as I'm speaking.
Yeah.
On behalf of a MAC. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's kind of, again, when we talked about the trailer tools and we were saying, here are the like suggestions to choose one. Is there a way to do something like that? Like, what does it need to include? Yeah, like criteria. How do you know it's not like, I'm sure that there's things that are very much all like, that's great in the ballpark. And then there's things like, no, that really doesn't qualify. Well, where is the line? Like, what is that criteria where we want to say, again, I know that one of the big things would be that it follows the guiding principles as one. So something like that, maybe that gives a little bit more.
So to vet them, but then who's vetting them?
Well, that gets back to that question, like who gets to decide that one is okay. Is it just agency by agency, and that's fine? Here it's like approved, standardized, like that is where I get a little like, who's approving and standardizing? For instance, using Hennepin as an example, is it is it the steering committee for this group? Is it us? I don't know, a VP policy or
My suggestion would be that it goes to the EBP committee, because we have members from all organizations that are part of that committee. And so it's evidence-based practices, right? It's like, that's what the evidence shows. That's where I think we should be leaning on that group committee for their advice, and then they bring it back to CSAC, where we ultimately would make those recommendations and to be put into policy, which we would agree upon. like we are, I mean, like we did with the LCMI. We agreed that came from this committee. We said, yep, we all agree the LCMI going forward, this is the risk assessment tool that we're gonna be using. So I would say similar to that would be my suggestion.
So Kelly, your concern of a pause for further definition, maybe pause isn't the right word, for further definition on this topic is what?
Oh, I was
Just like-
actually just trying to get at the concerns that Molly was raising about naming a particular one. Well, she was asking that we name one
Yeah.
training, but I also heard Tracy saying there's actually more than one training that would fit the bill. So then that boxes, counties in. So how do we give them the flexibility to access the training that works best for them, or, in terms of availability and trainers and all that stuff, but also meets a standard, which is the other thing
Right.
that they're trying to get at here. So, then that brings us back to who vets it, right? Like that's the box we're in. I'm like understanding all the sides of it now. It took me a minute here. But that might be the solution. If it was EBP advisory, would that sort of solve that issue?
Maybe it might solve. Oh, go ahead.
If we're turning over the training to the EBP, I have no objections to that. Can we just simplify the training section and at this point remove the shall and must and just encourage to attend training that addresses the IPV reunification principles?
Well, I don't think we're saying we're turning over the training to them. It's just, they are like an established group that's in statute that advises on which trainings fit the bill in different categories. So I think that all that Kevin is suggesting is that if we have to have somebody who says this is the list, it's them making that determination and bringing it forward here. I think you would be telling them, right?
Yeah.
The DV steering committee would
You
be
need
going to
subject matter
EBP.
experts.
Yes,
Yes,
as
yeah.
subject matter experts.
Advocacy, you need to have all those players
Yeah.
involved in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense, Tracy?
Yep.
So the policy would reference EBP advisory committee will like sign off or, establish the list or whatever. Does that make sense?
I mean, yeah, if that's what the group decides, it's to me, it always gets concerned with the subject matter experts in the DVS steering group too, is all, but again, I don't have the answer at the moment. I think that's having somebody do that makes a lot of sense to me. Cammie, you did a nice job also, I guess, summarizing what I'm also trying to say on behalf of MACAC, so I appreciate you. So it's also the accumulation of all of this. Like we have the initial training, the 16 hours EVP. So I think there's a overarching voice at MACAC around the totality of it, not just this one particular IPV training, I guess.
Yep. Okay. Clear as mud?
Very. So we bring this back to the next meeting is what I'm hearing?
That would be lovely. Can I ask one more question? It's similar to what Marlon actually just said in his comment about victims versus at-risk persons. I was actually just trying to think through and maybe the folks who actually do supervision are going to have to answer this one. I was trying to think through how does this get triggered when it's an individual with a domestic violence past who now wants to enter a new relationship with somebody else. So that's the at-risk person. And I think that we still have places in the policy where it's like, does all of this apply to both groups? Or do some things only apply to victims, the original victim? Even getting into the request for reunification, is that still the new partner making that request? Or is that a little bit more agent driven because they might have concerns about this new partner, or, you know, maybe the person trying to move in with this new partner? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll bring that back to the committee for review again.
Okay. I know that we've had a situation, I know that I've overseen a situation where someone wanted to be released to a residence with a new partner, and we had concerns because of their past. And so then that would have been us driving the bus there to prohibit reunification as opposed to, or prohibit that placement, right? As opposed to a request for reunification. So I'm just not sure like when these things get triggered and who does it. So maybe that example helps you understand where I'm coming from on that one.
Yep, very helpful.
All right, I think that does it for this one, unless there's any other comments or questions.
All right, I think I'm up.
Yes.
So number 4, new policy review. So gender, culturally and trauma responsive training policy. So this originally came back from 2024. So, or it was put into statute, one of the requirements that CSAC was originally tasked with. So by 12/1/2024, the committee must provide written advice and recommendations to the commissioner on developing policy on providing gender responsive, culturally appropriate services and trauma informed approaches. The evidence-based practices committee was tasked with this by CSAC to come up with advice and recommendations, which was then provided to this committee and which was passed on to the Commissioner of Corrections. The Commissioner of Corrections response was that he appreciated the work and understanding the importance of these, especially trauma-informed. And so his response, part of it was develop a comprehensive and accountable set of recommendations. And he had a date of by July 2025. That date was really recommended by this group, which came from EVP, because we thought we could have recommendations done by that time. It was a bigger lift than we had originally anticipated. And so from there, we started working on, the EVP committee started working on policy recommendations and policy formats to provide to the Commissioner, or to this group, and then to the Commissioner of Corrections. And so the EVP committee is still currently working on that, which now Corey Cohen is the EVP chair of the statewide advisory committee and has an update.
Thank you, Kevin. Just for background, this is my first meeting as the EVP Statewide Advisory Committee Chair. I'm a MACAC appointee, also the Assistant Director at Anoka County Community Corrections, and so that's kind of my background. Also, I've been involved in some of the other work on some of the other deliverables, supervision standards and case planning, to be specific, but coming in a little bit late to this process, and Kevin laid it out well. This is a very, I think, large, broad undertaking when you talk about gender, cultural, and trauma-informed responses in the work we do. And we know that when we are responsive to our clients' individual characteristics and needs, we're more effective. And that's what this whole deliverable is about, making sure that we're matching our local resources, our programming, our interventions, being sensitive to everyone's individual backgrounds, culture, gender, those types of things. And so, as Kevin mentioned, the EVP Advisory Committee initially looked at a fairly broad set of recommendations beyond just what we're here today to talk about as a policy on training. But they started out looking at a variety of other possible directions to take this. With some feedback, I think, from this group, and then just internal discussions, the decision was made to emphasize a training policy. And so now for roughly the last 6-8 months or so, that's been the primary focus of the group. In the meetings that I've been in now since late fall, we've made a lot of progress, and it was presented, a draft was presented to this group in December with some feedback and some direction to take it back and to continue to work on fine tuning some language. Some of the similar conversation that we just had on IPV. You know, what does training really look like? What are the elements of training? What's achievable? Where's capacity look like? All those same sort of conversations we've had in these meetings. And so where we're at today, so since the last CSAC meeting, there's been multiple meetings with the EBP advisory and a subcommittee specifically tasked with this policy. And we went back and we've reviewed some language. We looked at the purpose statement again. We've looked at definitions, the specific elements of training, but all of that through the context of what's realistic and achievable for agencies. Because that has been a kind of a key concern, I think, raised by all of the members of the committee. It's if we put something in policy, we want to be able to achieve it. And because this topic is broad and it encompasses, you know, very diverse populations across our state, there really can't be a one size fits all. It really does have to allow for flexibility, for agencies to steer their efforts, I think, toward the populations that they serve specifically. And so I brought forward just some 4 or 5 items that I'd kind of like just to vet out with the group today, get your input so we can take this back. But I also wanted to say, before we get into the policy itself, is I think the goal of this deliverable, if you think about the intent of the legislature, CSAC, the commissioner, is really for agencies to be intentional in this area, to be more, to make incremental improvements in how you deliver services to your diverse populations that you serve. A training policy is just one small piece of that. So a lot of this has to do with, you know, not only how we engage with our clients in our supervision approach, but what community services and resources do we have in our communities to serve these populations? For example, you know, looking at things like therapeutic interventions, programming, assessment and case management practices, all of that stuff can impact really positively responsivity around culture and gender and trauma-informed approaches. So again, what we're talking about here is really a small piece. I think there's a lot more work that can be done in this. And so maybe at some point when we come through with a policy that hopefully eventually is adopted, this group can continue to talk about this and continue to work forward or continue to advance these other areas and help agencies to be more strategic in these areas. So if you will allow me, I'll just kind of walk through some of the questions that have come up in the recent meetings. First of all, a lot of discussion regarding CSAC supporting policy language that would provide discretion to agencies to prioritize and emphasize their culturally responsive training that is aligned with their local populations. So you really, like I said before, there isn't an off the box or out of the box training for cultural responsivity. We all have different populations, depends on what part of the state we're in, if we're urban, if we're rural, if we're north, we're south. We all have these different groups that we serve. And so agencies do need to be able to tailor the training their staff receive to the populations that they serve. So we would ask that language would be acceptable in the policy. Secondly, there's been a fair amount of conversation within our group and with our tribal nation members regarding ensuring that tribal responsivity, tribal inclusivity is also included in the policy beyond just cultural responsivity. And I would invite any of our tribal members to weigh in on this or speak to this. But I learned through being on this committee that tribal inclusivity includes things like sovereignty issues, intergovernmental relationships, as well as those, cultural values, norms, language, all those other things that we think of kind of historically as cultural responsivity. So how does that sort of fit in the policy? And should tribal inclusivity, tribal responsivity be a requirement for all agencies to train on, depending upon what your population demographics are? And I think there's pros and cons, and not cons, but there's different arguments to that too. I mean, I think we all want to be well educated on these areas, but some of us serve different populations and more than others, certain types of clients. So where do we fit the tribal inclusivity into the policy? And then I guess ultimately, one of the big concerns here is readiness to implement and capacity to implement this. And so we are asking for some additional time, not only to finalize language to bring back on a final draft, but really to look at what are we doing statewide right now regarding training in responsivity broadly, but specifically cultural, gender, and then also trauma-informed. Just in our groups alone, we're talking about the wide range of practices that we have with our agencies, and many of us aren't providing training in all these areas. Some of us are, depends on our resources. Some agencies are saying we don't even know where to start. We don't have a trainer in this. We would partner with a community provider, for example, to bring in some education. So one of the recommendations would be to survey agencies and find out what people are doing, what services or what resources are out there around training in these areas, and who has gaps. And from that information, I think we could sort of put together almost a resource list, potentially, implementation guide, but also maybe then at that point, maybe be able to identify agencies that might be able to partner or share some of these responsibilities, not these responsibilities, but these training needs, because I think especially some of our smaller partner counties may not have the capacity. They may not know where to start in being able to partner with a neighbor or to provide some more broad statewide resource options. So we would ask that for some time to reach out to agencies, either through a formal survey process or informally. I suggest more of a formal process for that to occur. And then finally, I would just say that we all talked about getting sort of baseline information about what folks are doing more broadly in this area around responsivity. And we all know that, or the corrections side, we know that information is required in our comprehensive plans regarding gender responsivity, cultural responsivity, and trauma-informed approaches. That's going to be required in our comp plans under the narrative of core interventions and evidence-based practices. And so that is an area, an opportunity for agencies to showcase, highlight what they're currently doing, but also maybe help us identify where some gaps are and where folks need a little bit more technical assistance, a little bit more support. And what does that look like? Maybe that comes back to this group or to EBP just to talk that through further. So maybe we could gather some information from our comp plan reports to help us to inform a little bit where the state's at around this, because this is such a broad deliverable. And we're just talking about a small piece of it right now with training. So I know it's been kind of a long background. I just kind of wanted to give you some context, but I would encourage or invite some conversation or questions or feedback or responses to those questions I posed at this point.
I'd like to talk. I'm new with Corey on the EBP committee too, but one of the concerns was, once again, a heavy lift for small counties. If we prescribe everything we want them to do versus keeping it a wider range, and what does that look like?
Thank you, Corey. That well said. And I think a lot of the things this group has, like you said, whether it's this policy or others, like how to, because it's the right thing. We know it's evidence-based. It's in fact, some of the authors now talk about responsivity and the things that you just mentioned as being some of the most important things, and sometimes the hardest to, because it's not as like, here's an assessment, here's a training, right? It's like, that's just a more of a black and white sort of like tool that we have versus this is really how do you approach people in general, and people being so diverse and what makes us who we are. So I just appreciate that overview and the actually, and really thank you for your group and the attention to this. Like it's so important that you want to get it right or you want to give guidance. So it's not a checkbox. I think that is, especially in this particular category, what I don't want people to just go, I just did this training check. Right. Or and then we've heard that for so long around.
I have to.
Yeah, I have to do it. And like, what are we really talking about? We're talking about how do you know who you are in context with your clients? How do you grow? How do you know, like you said, what community resources to tap into for individuals? And it's a very important and complicated topic for sure. So again, thank you for your leadership and going through all of that and the entire group as well. I also just want to say I appreciate like kind of like the quality assurance policy that we have when we have a document that we can refer to like what is quality assurance? Like what choices do we have? What is best practice around that? It gives us a whole lot of guidance, and the policy kind of doesn't say you have to do all these things, but here, this is what we need you to do from a high level. And then here's so your point about, is it some resources? Is it how do you choose what is trauma informed? Some of those criteria or guidance feels like a good direction, in my opinion, as you are thinking about what this policy may look like. So those are my thoughts.
I've also been like I know that this has been one of the more challenging things that the legislature asked us to look at, and I feel bad for like not having said this sooner, because I think we're all trying to get our arms around so much that I don't like it's hard to focus on this piece until this piece is done and that piece is done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm sitting here and I'm like, does it have to be one policy? You know, or like could an approach, you know, be, what does it look like to provide gender responsive supervision? And just you know, like have a group just, you know, focus in on what is gender responsivity and how does it show up, how does it need to show up in supervision, and what do we need to do to get there? You know, is it training? Is it actually changing something about the way we supervise? Is it the assessment that we use? I mean, like there's all these things, right? So I kind of like, I kind of wonder if we should really be breaking this concept down into each of those buckets, right? Gender responsivity, cultural responsiveness. I forget what the third one was. Trauma informed. Like those are all things. Like what does it look like to provide trauma informed supervision, and what are the pieces that we need to put in place to do those? And I don't think we can achieve all of that all at once, right? Like it feels like having an incremental approach, breaking it down and approaching them separately, and ultimately building up a model with those things in mind. Because it, you know, like advanced supervision is, we are in one go with one person, we are being gender responsive, trauma responsive, and culturally responsive. You know, somebody will show up with all three things, right? And we are able to provide supervision that helps with all of those areas. But that won't happen tomorrow either, you know. So that's all I would say back, is like maybe we're not breaking it down enough even.
Thank you. Forgot to raise my hand before I unmuted. I was just going to chime in with I think the kind of what Kelly is talking about, where we're sort of explaining what all these things are and providing that information to agencies is a smart idea, and it's a little bit of what's been in the back of my head as we've gone through all of these policies. We're trying to do policies that are so policy like, here's what you're going to do, the shall and the must and the do it. And yet there doesn't get to be a lot of explanation and education about some of those things. And I think even as Rhonda is probably going to start talking about JRI 2 and standards, that's been a little bit of the discussion too, is are we wording these things as this is the idea and the concept of what we should do, and trying to be less prescriptive sometimes gives people a little bit better understanding of what we're doing instead of saying do A, B, and C. The idea of here's what we want you to understand about this and what it should look like. And if we're doing good supervision, here's sort of our end goals of what we should be accomplishing. So I like the concept of what Kelly's saying with that kind of across the board, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it feels like, you know, work groups just on like, I know that this is what the supervision standards group did, but like, what's the latest research in this area? Like, what, given that, like, what do agents need to learn? And how to, like, is that training? Is that something that should be required? Like, it all goes, like, there's a lot of questions that flow from it, but the education piece is so important. And then once they're educated, how do we help them practice it? Once they've practiced it, how do we make sure it's ongoing and it's not a one and done, you know? So it's, that's the type of transformation I think we're all seeking. The question is how to get there and what does it look like? I think if we can figure out what it looks like to be there, we might be able to figure out what it takes to get there. And in some places, I don't mean to say that none of this is happening. It is. Like, there are pieces of this that are happening everywhere across the state.
Kevin, how do you, sorry to put Kevin, I'm going to put Kevin on the spot here because he's been doing this for a long time. Do you see this as a significant pivot or shift to the work that's been done? Or do you think a lot of this sort of foundational, some of the things they're talking about is, you know, defining these, we have definitions, but actually maybe illustrating what this looks like in practice? I mean, we have the expertise in the room, I think, to do that. Would that be a major shift, do you think, with the focus of the EBP advisory? And when if I go back with this kind of feedback, what do you think?
No, it's a good question. Good feedback. Good suggestions. This is a heavy lift. It's for any group to take on because nationwide, there's not a lot of research and evidence-based information out there on these topics. We know they're important, but there is no set, this is a must training. This is like the best training, period. There is none of that in any of these. There's trainings available, but we still don't have the research of, is that the best training? Is that a good training? We don't know. And so that was like a big issue when we took on this about like trying to put out there, you know, like, hey, we suggest agencies use ACEs, for example. We know ACEs is a good tool. Do we know it's the best? You know, we don't. And to put in policy to require each agency to do a certain training without fully knowing, and then maybe a cost associated with it, that's another lift. And so I think this group, when I say this group, CSAC and EBP, you know, have went back and forth like, all right, we need to be more dialed in. We need to be more specific on what trainings we're going to recommend. And then we need to make it more general. We go back and forth with that. And I think the biggest reason is because we don't have a set definition of what is for each one of these a good training and to put into practice. So I think I would put it back on the EBP committee to do some more deeper dives into like some general, what are some things or what some counties are doing. And if they have research, Be like, yeah, we've been doing this for 5 years and this is what we've shown. Let's get that information. Like that's the information. We want that data. And I guess I would turn to the EBP group to see like, and your surveys, I think an excellent idea. Get surveys out there, see what agencies are using. Training, sharing, perfect. If we can do online training where there's not a cost associated, but get something going just to see where things are at, I think is appropriate rather than putting something right in the policy, say every agency needs to do it without fully understanding or knowing that is what we should be doing. So I agree with Kelly's comment, suggestion, and bring it back to that group and getting more information, because this is a big thing. Because like even when we're doing the LCMI, we're using these, right? These all go into that when we're doing these, when we're meeting, doing intakes, doing probation agreements, doing PSI investigations. We're using all these. So this is like, to in my opinion, one of the most important ones, because everything that we do, this is the base of it. So I agree that we should take our time with this one.
So I guess I'm asking the group, is this a sort of a change in, a little bit of change in focus for the EBP advisory to really look at a framework for what cultural, gender, and trauma-informed responsive approaches really looks like, sort of like the supervision standards group is working on, more of a broad framework. This is best practice in quotes, before we really prescribe a training policy. We can still simultaneously gather information from agencies. We can do research, national research, find out what's out there. We have a lot of people at the table that know this stuff really well. We really do. If you look at the group, the EBP group, but we haven't packaged it necessarily in the way that I think Kelly and Molly are sort of describing, where this is kind of what good practice looks like in this area in responsivity. And then how do you get there? Policy can maybe come behind it a little bit after you kind of know what it is. And what are people doing? What are people doing now around this? Where are our gaps? And where are the resources needed? That kind of thing. So I don't know if I'm hearing the direction correctly. I just want to make sure I communicate it back effectively to the group when I go back to the next meeting, if that's the direction. And do we continue to work on a training policy, or do we just kind of table that? We have a draft. That can be picked up at any time. So I guess I'm looking for a little bit further clarity just to bring back to my group.
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
I mean, to me, having that framework, understanding what is good practice, what skills do agents need to be able to achieve that practice, right? That could bring us back to this training needs to happen, right? It could bring us back to other changes too that might need to happen for agencies to achieve those things. But I don't even know like what that would look like. It may not ever be policy, right? It may just be resource guides and things like that. So yeah, I like it, but I've talked too much. What other people think.
It's a question from someone who has a little background on this, but how do you measure implementation and progress? What does that look like?
I think that's an excellent question, and we've floated that. We've had that very conversation. I think one of the ways that we do it currently is we report out through our comprehensive plan process, or through our advisory boards, sort of what our current agency practices are in this area. But some of this stuff isn't quantitatively measurable. I mean, some of this stuff, the interaction between a probation agent and their client, if they're intentional with using responsivity principles, that's something that has to be observed by a supervisor, coached on, trained on. So there's that element. But then I think there's also the question about, does your community have the supportive resources to be responsive in these areas to your population? Do you have therapists? Do you have treatment providers that can meet people where they're at, whether that's for cultural backgrounds, gender, folks who are trauma informed that can provide these services? Do you have it? And I guess that's another question for implementation. And so I think it's a broad question. I don't know that we can necessarily get a lot of numbers Maybe in some areas we can, but others it's a little bit more probably anecdotal. Maybe feedback from our clients, seeking input from clients too. Do you feel like we're meeting you where your needs are? I mean, we do need to ask our clients these questions too. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, I think like I don't know if this is helpful, Commissioner, but we're doing, so to kind of run a parallel in our juvenile institution, we just started using out of Texas Christian University. It's a trauma-informed approach for how to work in an institution. And the example that usually resonates with a lot of people is when you have so you can translate this to anybody, right? Adult, kid, but in this particular example, we'll have a kid that is like stealing snacks and food and hoarding them in their room, let's say, right? In the past, there's been a lot of looking at a kid and that's a willful disobedience, right? That we need to sanction, punish, take rights, whatever it might be. But after you use your assessments and motivation, all the things we talk about, in all of our practices, you find out really that this kid had food insecurities his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so him taking that food is survival. So trying to differentiate using all of our tools, it's like we're trying to apply all this responsivity on top of everything else we're doing to say, okay, instead of going, why did you do that? And getting into that, again, you're a kid that's just like not following direction, into you're a kid that's trying to survive because you don't know when you're going to get your next meal, is a very different approach, right? So what we're trying to do here is to say, yeah, that's what becomes so complicated. How do you measure that? How we measure that in ours is definitely, I like that idea of like the client surveys. We do a lot of that, but it's also in how you write your log notes. It's in how you have the treatment plans for each of those kids. What does that look like, right? And I think that trauma-informed approach of saying, okay, how we respond to that kid. And there are some kids that are willful disobedient, right? Like that is a thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to figure out how do all of our responses and what we're doing match that. And I think that's what becomes hard, is that it's not a checkbox, like an assessment. You did the assessment, you did the reassessment. It's how are you actually like using this? And I think that one other thing I would suggest your group when they're digging into some of this is, like, you're right, there's a lot of really smart people doing some of this. There's also like SAMHSA and NAMI, like where do we take, like we have other things out there. Motivational interviewing didn't come from corrections. It came from the, medical and the chemical dependency world. So what is out there and how can we partner with people to get this right? Because I don't think it's not just purchasing something off the shelf, right? That's not yet. Otherwise we'd say, let's do that, right? So anyway, I don't know if that is helpful.
It's
and
helpful.
kinda,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, and then I was going to say that, another thing an agency can do is tie these practices to advancement, right? So like in DOC, we now like formally have learning EVP practice, learning evidence-based practices, as part of moving from an agent to senior to career. And we have figured out ways to measure that it's happening, that the agents are engaged, that the supervisors are actually checking, and doing evaluations and understanding where the agent's at. And if you're not gaining the skills, you're not going to move up. Okay. So like those are like, that doesn't have to be a policy, but it could be a recommended type of practice, right? Like that an agency can do so that you're not advancing people who shouldn't be in this field, right? Who can't learn the skills, or that you're even going the other way and you're disciplining the individual if they're not doing the work that they need to be doing, and you're showing them the door, if they can't do that. So there's a lot of different ways to build this in. It doesn't all have to be in policy at the end of the day, but I think it'd be great. I think that what we've been asked by the legislature is to figure out how to build this into the fabric of what we do. And I don't think policy is going to get us there in every way, right?
And I think that was a concern when we looked at the policy. It was so prescriptive. We all kind of panicked. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it was just a moment of, how do we do this? This doesn't feel right. We're not going to get the ends that we want.
Clear as mud.
This has been very helpful. I do think I'll I'll be able to take this feedback back to the group. And I think if we can start back from a kind of a theoretical framework of really effective practices in these areas and at least present that. And then we still have the ability to create policy off of that if we feel that it's appropriate to do so. And then we can simultaneously, if we feel that that's helpful, we could survey agencies just to see what folks are doing currently, just get a lay of the land right now, as well as we have our comp plans to report out current practices as well. But I think it would be helpful to kind of know where the state of the state when it comes to responsivity would be good to know as we sort of build this out. So we can do that. So thank you.
Thank you. You want to move on or do you want to take a
I
break?
think we could take a break.
Nice, Kevin. I appreciate that.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So, how long do you want to take? You're the chair right now.
Oh. 5-10 minutes? What do you want?
Either.
I think the supervision standards is the next big one, right? And then everything else after that's a little, so we probably could do 10.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break. So was it 10:51? So 11:01? I know John didn't take.
I know, I was
breaks.
gonna say, thanks for not taking John Shiro's modeling of power. Yeah, John never took a break. And so he's like,
Power
power through 3
Power
hours and I
through.
go like.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So 11:01.
Sorry.
All right, outline of supervision standards. I believe the turnover. Oh,
May
did I
I-
take yours? I'm sorry.
No. May I just, I have a communication from Barb Weckman-Brecky, who is online, but having a hard time unmuting. If it's okay, she's asking me to make a couple broad statements on her behalf on the last discussion, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll do my best here. She says and if you can come off mute, feel free, but I will do my best here, Commissioner, on your statements here. She says, I do think the discussion was really good and this group is doing some very awesome hard work. Regarding evaluation of these informed and inclusive efforts, I feel like we need to not lose sight of the fact that if we are making progress on this area, the ultimate outcomes for individuals should be better. We care about trauma-informed and inclusive practices because we believe humans deserve it, but also because we think it will be helpful in getting folks to better places in their lives, less recidivism, stable housing, and employment. Number 2, I hope we have flexibility on the policy as we and the world continues on how to do this work better. The information we know and practices we have are around trauma-informed care and sensitivity and inclusive practices related to gender, orientation, tribal relation, etc., have changed so much over the years, and we will continue to develop our knowledge in this area. Just think how we talked about this in practice around these topics 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Thanks. And she's continuing to listen. And so thank you for that time. Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. So, outline of supervision standards.
Yeah, so
Rhonda?
we're working on the standard of supervision for adults. And what we did, we just put a framework together today, a framework to see if we are on the right track with this. And we're all going to take pieces of this. So Tracy Hooterlick is going to start with the outline and the standard that we developed and kind of that approach of a client lens and our evidence base. So I'm hoping Tracy is.
I'm here.
Yay.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I don't know if you want to pull that up on the screen, the outline, or if I should just go off my own copy. which I certainly can do. But the first piece of this puzzle is, like Rhonda said, this group has been, I should give a little background. This group has been meeting for quite some time. And we really took into account what was done by CSG several years ago when they came here, what their recommendations were most recently, what the commissioner's expectations were for this committee, as well as what legislative language was pertinent to this group. And just like that last conversation you all had about training, it's big. It's hard to narrow down that focus of what is standard of supervision for adults. And so we really had to whittle it down. So we really looked at, we started looking at the APPA community standards of supervision, which is American Probation and Parole Association, came up with some kind of national standards. We started taking a look at those and seeing where Minnesota might need some improvement, where we could focus on some things. And come up with that. And I know Rhonda said it, and it says it at the top of the paper, but we really are focusing on adults right now. This is not juvenile standards at this point in time. But we took a look at it from a two-prong approach in what will the client experience? So from a client perspective, I should expect to have a similar experience under supervision, whether I'm being supervised in a large county like Hennepin, or whether I'm being supervised in a small county, like Aiken, right? So, so that I should have that, that I should only have to report to one agent, right? So we should consolidate our cases, and we do that in Minnesota through an intrastate policy, but that could be approved upon. And that my conditions are tailored to me, to my risk and needs. And then we looked at it from the approach of risk, need, responsivity, and evidence-based principles. So not just the quantity, how often someone should be seen, but the quality of that contact matters, that we should be utilizing that time to conduct interventions for those that have a risk level that needs that. And that we should also look at, we know in corrections, we know how to monitor, we know how to monitor for compliance. And sometimes we tend to, as a whole, over supervise cases that maybe don't need the types of interventions that we need. And that can also have a detrimental effect. So trying to take a look at that over supervision piece as well. And then we put in here, apply equally high levels of pressure and support, meaning not only are we just going to monitor to ensure someone completes their conditions of supervision, but we're going to support them along the way with, positive interactions and providing the tools that they need to succeed, not just that monitoring. So then we took a look at, you talked about it in the last hour about training. There's so much going on in the state of Minnesota right now. And where are we at? And a lot of this kind of standards are already in the works or completed and being implemented. So we know we already have consistent training across the state. We have a policy about that. We have agents that participate in statewide training with the same kinds of things being trained. Motivational interviewing, case planning, correctional practices, those kinds of things, so that we can have agents that are at the same base level. All of this is kind of ongoing. So I think when I read through this, I think we got a little bit of ahead of ourselves in a couple of things, but, and then again, in assessment. So we have agents that are trained similarly. We are assessing clients with the same types of assessments consistently across the state. So I know that is in the works there with the LSCMI, with the validation, with pre-screening tools, and then some standards for trailer tools are all in progress. So that will get us kind of at the same baseline as well. And then the case planning and behavior modification, we have that policy in place that's going to talk about agents, training and how we case plan for high and very high risk individuals, as well as a hope and a plan for medium risk in the future. So that's kind of our current state. We go down there, we have IPV as well. That's a little bit ahead of ourselves. And then the ISR transformation policy is already in place. So that just kind of leads us to where are we missing? Where are we missing things? And so our recommendations from this committee, and again, Rhonda said it, is we wanted to make sure we are on the right track with CSAC, that you like the direction that we are proposing. And then our thoughts are based on the recommendations of things that we want to move forward with. We'll look at what current policy exists to see whether or not we just need to insert, add, update current policy, or where we might need brand new policy altogether. So that's kind of where we're at. So John is going to talk about supervision levels, but we propose 5 levels, and he's going to talk about that in a minute. And not only are we proposing levels, but then what we do with those cases and why we would propose that level and that level of intervention. Couple of other things that we want to take a look at is that risk level and supervision level are distinct from each other. So risk level drives initial supervision level, but we also wanted to ensure that we consider a reduction of supervision level when progress is made, despite a higher risk score for those individuals that have that high risk based on static factors that they can't readily change, quickly, right? So maybe they're young and they need to get older before they can really reduce their risk level. So that's distinct from each other. That we have some contact standards that John is going to talk about on the next form and slide. And that we require that quality of interaction, right? We're using evidence-based principles. We're using risk-need responsivity. We're using cognitive behavioral interventions, and those interventions are aligned with the risk level of that person. So our intervention is relevant to the risk, right? Again, 1 agent per client. We're going to consolidate cases. And for those of you that might not be in the corrections field, you could have an individual that is under supervision with different agencies within Minnesota, in different counties, for example. And depending on their circumstances, those cases aren't always easily transferred to just one individual. So you could have a client that is reporting to multiple agents. Then we talk about level of supervision, so that can change, right? So after someone has completed dosage or completed programming, been reassessed, we can consider reductions of supervision based on a period of substantial compliance and progress towards their goals. And Cammie's going to talk about desistance in a little bit as well. That we focus too on early discharge, so that can be considered when it's legally permissible and when it's appropriate, so that we don't keep people under supervision longer than they need to be. We propose a single definition of recidivism, and I don't have that definition yet, but used by all agencies in the state of Minnesota, so that we can accurately compare data with each other, right? So just ensuring that we are all on the same baseline for reporting out on that. And then considering removing very low level offenses, such as like non-DUI traffic, petty misdemeanor offenses from supervision entirely. And that would take some work with our stakeholders, with our community partners in that area. But, some people are placed on supervision for an offense that is so low level, it would not always require supervision. So if you want to scroll down a little bit, Don, on this. Our timeline's a little off now because we've missed a couple meetings, so it'd probably take us a little longer. But we would, we would like to, based on the feedback from CSAC, then begin pushing these ideas, proposals through policy, to update policy or to create new policy where needed, for CSAC's review this summer. Then once we have kind of the basics under our belt, we do have some ideas for the future, and Cammie will talk, or I'm sorry, Rhonda. I said Cammie twice now. Sorry about that. Rhonda, I'm looking at Cammie. That's why you're on my screen right in front of me, Cammie. Sorry. Rhonda will talk about that in a second. So our future priorities too is to look at, especially for service treatment, that we're using evidence-based models within corrections. So for example, when our agencies are providing treatment, that it is evidence-based, that it involves cognitive behavioral interventions, and that we're doing that to fidelity to that program. And then we would like to take a look at supervision conditions to align with EVP and R&R principles. And that would take some education of our justice partners, as well as some legislative changes in standards of supervision. But that looks then more like utilizing cognitive behavioral interventions and different types of programming within supervision conditions to allow that to occur. And being a little more person-centered in those approaches. Along that same line, Minnesota does a lot of pre-sentence investigations for individuals, and it goes through a history and of that individual, and we propose not even just the history, but then that template aligns with assessment headings, so we can talk about what that person's individual criminogenic needs are and how we might address those within that PSI setting. So it would mirror the headings of like the LSCMI, so that everyone would have a good idea of what areas of focus that client should have, and then what types of interventions might be appropriate for them. So that's the beginning, the outline. And I'm happy to answer any questions now, or like John can go ahead and start talking about the table of supervision.
No
Any
question.
questions or comments before we turn over to John? Thank you, Tracy, for the summary. I think we'll have more questions once we go through it more. So I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks. Yeah, so we, again, just to reiterate, wanted to kind of delineate the quality of contacts versus the quantity of contacts. And so, Tracy provided kind of that overview of how we kind of got to where we're at, and then this is the framework. So we wanted to establish something of a draft for the CSAC members that provides what it could look like based upon the 5-level framework. So on the left side there, you have the level of criminogenic needs, 1 through 5. This again we would be attempting to coincide this with the LSCMI, right? And so going from very low to very high. But we are using a numerical system here of 1 through 5. So it kind of, covers the basic criminogenic needs in that next column there. As you obviously go through from low to high, you have none to multiple. Is a profile and a 2-year recidivism without intervention and how that looks like, to try to kind of explain and provide some detail around why you are focusing your interventions with this population based upon the likelihood of reoffense. So really the third column is where our contacts are at, right? So establishing kind of a minimum contact standard. And I think, again, one of the things that our group has spent a lot of time talking about is the difference between kind of what we're proposing as far as a minimum contact standard and then what would be best practices. And so you can see here for a level 1, minimal or administrative monitoring, which can just be, even through mail or phone, all the way through level 5, where you're monitoring once weekly for safety and compliance. So just a couple things I'll point out here as part of our conversation. We're using the term monitor. I think as we've walked through other policies with this group, we're trying to speak broadly while presenting, I guess, some pretty prescriptive ideas of what a minimum contact standard can look like. And so we use the term monitor. And so we're not saying that this has to be face-to-face, in this context. But again, this is just our first draft as we present it to you. So you have, like I said, the third column really is the focus on those minimum face-to-face monitoring standards for our 5 levels. Then you have a treatment effect in the 4th column there, and the likelihood or impact that you can have with your treatment or interventions. And then the prognosis for client in the last column there, going from excellent and then looking to obviously improve prognosis through intervention, as you can see from the 4th to the 5th column there. So I'll pause just for like 5 seconds. Are there any
questions for John or feedback? Hearing none. Oh, is he on mute?
No, he's not. Your audio went out, John.
It looks like you're unmuted though, so I don't know.
He's unmuted.
Blue Earth is going through an update at the moment. Stand by.
We'll get IT on the horn.
Right, exactly.
Am I back?
Oh, there you are.
There you
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
That's a good one, Molly. Okay. 2 things. One, again, I just want to reiterate, we're using a term of monitoring. 2, the other thing that we talked about, and Tracy alluded to this, is the fluidity of supervision. And so that we have this, within our group, a lot of discussion around how somebody goes from one supervision level to the next, decreasing in supervision or based upon compliance, increasing supervision based upon non-compliance, and how that looks and how that doesn't necessarily always coincide with a reassessment. And so that's one of the talking points I would say that we spent the most time on within our group is the fluidity of supervision and how somebody can go from one level to the next and what leads to that change in that supervision level. So that'll be one of the things I think we try to focus in on as we move ahead. And then the last thing I was going to mention too is when we're talking about this, again, I'm really reinforcing this as a minimum contact standard, and best practices would be different. Another piece of conversation with our groups that we receive feedback from was the impact or the usefulness of field visits or contacts in the community. And this document doesn't kind of articulate, well, you need to have a face-to-face or a home visit done, once a year is just an example. But that was a point that was brought up in a couple different meetings, was the idea of how do we also, as we kind of move forward, talk about what some of the best practices as it relates to the actual face-to-face contacts with our clients, how that should look, and the difference between that of best practice and then what we're trying to articulate on a policy as far as the base for minimum contact standards. So anything else from Tracy or Rhonda on the framework?
No, I think we had a lot of discussion about those minimum contacts in the context of if you're supervising, how do you know your agent? I mean, if we told an agent, give them anything to go by, well, how often are they going to see them? We wanted to give them just some baseline things that this is the bare minimum that you need to do. We hope you go up from there, but this is what we want you to do for that floor.
Well, and I would just also point out too that we based this on research. This wasn't just, JR Phase 2 committee came up with this, that's referenced in that document.
And it was interesting. When CSG had collected a lot of information, we took the information from those counties that submitted that, And we looked at that data and compared it to this data. It was very, very close to what counties were doing based on low, medium, high. Maybe not on the numbers, but based on that level. So that was validating to Minnesota, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Rhonda. I think as we looked back at some of the data that had been collected, we didn't, feel like we were completely far off. So yeah, excellent point.
So moving on to the additional considerations, the first one is exactly what John was alluding to, is that fluidity between supervision levels. And so this was all the information given in to us by our JRI members of how can we be fluid and what do we look at? And not that we have to do a LSI reassessment every single time. What are those things? Meaningful progress towards goals, sustained positive behavior. That includes stability, community stability, pro-social behaviors and supports, compliance, absence of repeated violations, to increase, when there's documented evidence of the increased risk on their reassessment, new criminal behavior, repeated or serious technical violation despite the interventions, and behaviors that place the community and the victims at risk. And what do we require for that for documentation? Yes, sometimes the risk reassessment, but also case notes and chronos, case plan progress updates, court, HRU, collateral reports, violation histories. The second consideration was our data collection, because we know we have a ways to go on this. And how do we get us all on the same page for collecting consistent data to measure the outcomes, right? Including recidivism, new arrests, new convictions, technical violations, time to first reoffense and severity, frequency of reoffending, initial risk levels and reassessment results, supervision violations, programming data, referrals, completion versus partial completion, successful case closures and discharges using statewide definitions. In our conversations, people are closing things differently, sometimes with the same criteria, but the case closure is different. So, and measuring progress and desistance. I mean, here we're talking about, that risk reduction and the presence of pro-social gains, and the changes in dynamic risk domains, employment and educational stability, housing stability, quality of our relationships and social supports, community involvement, and the completion of their goals linked to their criminogenic needs. A desistance-informed lens recognizes that progress builds protective factors, not only reducing risk. So how do we measure this qualitatively and responsivity measures? So to support desistance and engagement, counties should consider tracking these things: client self-reported measures, agency, hope, future orientation, alignment of goals with their personal values, responsivity accommodations provided, quality of participation and engagement, relationship factors, client and agent relationship, perceived fairness, cultural responsivity. The third is what we've talked about a couple of times: risk level versus supervision level, and how, the risk level may stay the same, but that supervision level, we really want to have that fluidity. And we can't always anchor supervision to assess risk, and allow supervision to flex based on their risk, behavior, engagement, and stability. Recognize that risk level does not directly equate to supervision level always. Some individuals may not experience significant changes in their static risk, but supervision may still be adjusted based on behavior, compliance, and progress towards change. Regular reassessment and structured reviews are essential to maintaining fluid and responsive supervision. And what does the impact of placement or residential treatment look on supervision? In some counties, if you're in the local treatment place, that agent is still going to see you. If you're in northern Minnesota, 4 hours away, what does that look like? Just because you're gone somewhere doesn't always mean that supervision level goes down. So risk should be reassessed following placement with clear guidance on timing. During placement, agents should have flexibility to modify contact standards while services are being delivered. Upon return to the community, supervision level should be reassigned based on updated risks, behavior adjustment, and dosage needs. So we want to leave room for innovation. We want to have people still be, trying new EBP practices, but we also want consistency and policy adaptability. So really doing a statewide framework approach, establishing a new statewide supervision framework rather than a rigid prescriptive policy. Define common elements such as supervision levels, cut points, and expectations. Allow counties to develop their own internal policies consistent with the framework. Require reporting through standardized outcomes and comp plans. And always have a continuous improvement and review. Create a structured review process with defined timelines. Use a collaborative body like the EBP Statewide Advisory to review emerging research tools and innovations and getting that information out. Ensure policies remain responsive to new evidence related to desistance, dosage, engagement, and supervision practices. So the question we were always asking is dynamic risk changing? Is the individual's life becoming more stable and pro-social as they go through their supervision? And the table, I mean, these were our key guidance to practice and how would we document that? And I think there was just so much conversation of what we're lacking in CSDS and just the statewide communication between counties of doing things the same. And that would be a lift to get everybody on the same page with that. Do you want me to go through the whole reference table?
I don't think we need to do that, but.
Okay.
Is there any key points or highlights to it?
It's really everything we talked about. When you look at reoffenses, and it's everything we also talked about EBP, right? Response, R&R, responsivity and all those things. We just put it in what I talked about, we just put in a nice little table for you. So are we on the right track?
So I do have a question, because one of these areas, certain offenses not being placed on probation. And so I know we have a judge on the meeting with us as well. So that like is out of our control. And I'll give you, for example, in my county, we just not too long ago had a pre-sentence investigation ordered on a driving after revocation. And then placed on probation. It's a misdemeanor offense, up to 90 days in jail. But those are typically, I would prefer not to, for one, do a PSI on those. And then two, probation to supervise. Well, the reason why a PSI was ordered because this was the person's like fourth or fifth, keeps getting DARs. The county attorney's office requested it, the judge ordered it because they respect probation's opinion and recommendation. They want to see like, what can we do to like stop this individual from continuing to get DARs? I support that. And then also in the CPO world, the judges are also my boss. So that's, I'm not going to tell the judge, no. and so that's the other side of it. So if cases are ordered to be on probation, that's going to be out of our control, my control, as far as what that looks like. But I would support like having that conversation with the judges, and obviously they would have to be on board with it and be supportive of it across all 87 counties. So I think that's another task or avenue that we'd have to seek rather than just from this group, because we don't have any control over that. That's just my 2 cents on the offenses.
And we talked about that in our group, Kevin, and I think it's a multi-pronged approach on that way as well, is an education, because we know we don't have unlimited resources, right? Like, and so our resources should be focused on the individuals that need our services the most. And so there's an education piece on that, as well as then also, even if they are placed under our supervision, then we have discretion as to how to handle that, right? Like how often we'll see that individual, or how often we'll, do, like typically I would say in that scenario, that would be someone that would have very low intervention needs, right? So yeah, you're right. It is that's why it is kind of down there, as we'd really like to work on this. It's a little bit out of our hands, but we'd have to do some education and do some, you know, how we handle that case once it comes to us as well.
Thank you. And I see the judge has her hand up.
No, we can't hear you, Judge.
You're still on mute.
Looks like you're on mute from our perspective.
How's that now?
Oh, can hear you. Oh,
Okay,
yep.
perfect. All right. Yeah, no, I appreciate the input because it was actually something I was kind of taking down in my notes. And I think from the judge perspective, a bit is, what is the alternative? And so to keep that in mind is that there is the legislature that says these are the sentences that can be imposed, and probation being an alternative to incarceration. And so if you have really low level offenses that may not have a lot of supervision needs, but what is the alternative then? Is it, you know, it's imposing strictly just the conviction, and then there's nothing beyond that, because you don't want to do the alternative of, well, you don't really need probation supervision, so let's impose some jail time. I mean, that flips it completely in the wrong direction from my perspective. But there needs to be some accountability, and what does the community expect as well for individuals that have been convicted of an offense. So all of the good things to, I think, just continue the conversation about, and about the education and what can the alternatives be.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other feedback or comments? That was a lot of information. Good work.
My feedback is, wow, like you guys have really had some big conversations, like really big conversations and far reaching. And I so appreciate the approach that you've taken, bringing the research to the table, you know, building out ideas based on that research. You know, like I personally like the direction it's going. I'm sure there will be a lot of haggling over the details. I'm sure that I see some things in here and I'm like, well, I'll be interested to see if we can reach resolution on that. You know, like it's not, you did not bite off an easy task here. But from my perspective, I think you did identify some of the really key things that need to be thought about next, and worked into a framework for supervision. So that's my response. And I love the fact that you're thinking about it from the point of view of, you know, what should supervision look like, you know, talking about having that flexibility, giving us tools to be able to move people to the right place, the right level of supervision, understanding that fluidity, tying that to evidence-based practices and risks and needs. Yeah, I'm like kind of, my jaw is on the floor. I'm really impressed with like how much work you've done in this, and I like the direction that it's going.
So when we look at going forward with policy, then kind of wrapping it around into a more formal policy, but still leaving a fairly big framework at this point, you're comfortable with?
I think so.
I think it seems, yeah, I agree with you all. I think it seems like the right direction, and also am extremely impressed that it's very robust and thoughtful. And yeah, it is a framework so far, as we talked about, even just some of the responsivity. And again, it's for us going to be around how these things, of course, overlay and integrate, because they're all integrated. They're not mutually exclusive policies or approaches. And so I think it's remarkably impressive as well. The one question I wondered if you, what's the word? I've been trying to figure out how to, without getting too like in the weeds and technical, to like ask this question. So let me give it a shot here. In terms of what is meaningful progress, and I know, and what is substantial, there's a few terms that you're using on substantial progress. I'm looking for it. I underlined it. And I look at your reference table, like how do you even know and measure that, right? So again, it's here, it's extremely thoughtful. When we think about the levels 4 and 5 on the framework, and we think about, again, your overall research when we incorporate things as far as dosage or how much time, the thing that I wonder about is, so for instance, this is where I need to give an example that's technical. When we have the LSCMI as our main assessment tool, we do know there's static factors, right? A lot of criminal history, are your parents deceased? So there's certain items for sure that come into static. And then there's a lot of dynamic factors as well that also say can't be changed until a year, as an example, right? So what I'm getting at here is for levels 4 and 5 is meaningful progress. Is there at least a time frame that we would want so the example would be you have somebody high or very high risk, and you're working through a case plan and goals with someone, and they practice some COG skills or they attend treatment. We wouldn't want to drop the supervision level too soon, because what we know about anything that you're trying to create as a new like habit, like, and you could use a medical model or anything else. You don't go to, therapy for something, physical therapy once and say, well, they made it, they're good to go, right? No, like the physical therapy would say, no, they're like 6 months at least or whatever, to be able to say like they've come for a substantial period of time. So I don't want to get too prescriptive. I really like how you have these frameworks. I'm wondering for especially some of these higher categories though, that again, if the research nationally and globally is saying, as an example, 300 hours of like interventions, that's going to take a couple of years, right? So I guess I just get a little worried that we don't have so much flexibility that we're not thinking about what is the sustained behavior that we're looking for to make sure that we're not too preemptively, without an updated risk assessment, dropping a supervision level, if that made sense, because it will drop in those domains that are dynamic when we're ready to do our reassessments anyways. And so I get what the group is trying to do. It's not to be, again, too rigid.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry about this higher end group being so flexible that we're not keeping people long enough to see that sustained change. Hopefully that made sense.
That made sense. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of what we talked about in that flexibility area was, okay, we'll still keep you at that high, but we might not contact you as much, right? We're still going to keep you, and then we'll ebb and flow with those contacts. So maybe you get to miss one a month. Instead of 4 times a month, we'll meet you 3 times a month.
Sure.
That's what we kind of talked about in some of that flexibility in
Okay.
those higher range ones. But I think we need to be more clear on that.
Yeah, and to me, what that said was like incentives. So back to like, again, we're not doing a formal response grid. So again, I think that we need to, just like any case management or framework, we need to go up or down at any point in time, for sure. Like there's times you might have a medium or somebody in level 3 and you need to see them weekly for a month, right? Like we know that. And that's what I'm hearing is do that, like do what the client needs in any given situation. And we're trying to create a floor. And so I just think about these higher levels of, we have a lot of research that we need to do quite a bit in order for somebody to desist, and just want to make sure that we're not too prematurely, I guess, dropping the floor, if that makes sense.
And I know John has his hand up, but I'll just real quickly say that like the ISR policy does require 6 months sustained behavior change to transition off ISR, right?
Things like that.
So stuff like that maybe could be incorporated there. Maybe there is a place where that floor has a little more rigidity if there are concerns like that. But you can think about that as you work on it.
Right. It's more food for thought.
John,
not
you had
that
your
have an
hand up?
answer.
Yeah, to Molly's point, I think one of the things I think about is the case planning policy. Our highs and very highs, we're supposed to be engaging in the case planning policy. What language I'd have to go back. I know we wrote it, but I'd have to go back to the case planning policy and pull out information from there to try to help us get to what you're referring to, Molly, right? So what are we asking agents to do in regards to case planning and the engagement with the client that would then reflect an ability for their supervision to decrease? I think that's what I was talking about in one of the meetings when we were talking about these overlap of the policies. So how does the case planning policy impact your supervision levels? And how does your risk assessment, like you're talking about, now how does the risk assessment policy interact with our supervision levels as well? The only other thing I thought of, and this is kind of off to the side a little bit, but you think about how we're implementing supervision abatement and earned compliance credits. We're using a 60-day window in CSTS for those credits. And so when you talk about kind of the time frame, I guess that's just kind of what stuck out in my head is that on that side, we're using 60 days, but I think, you know, again, I just would go back to the idea of where the case planning policy is taking us. Can we use that language and information to help us, like you say, write this policy as far as where we go with the supervision and the fluidity?
Thank you. Kind of along the same lines of what was being discussed. One thing that I noticed here was dosage expectations. I'll just speak for my county. We don't use dosage. And when I was in Pine County, we examined using dosage, and we found that it didn't work for gross misdemeanor, misdemeanors, just because of the length of time that they're on probation for. So it just didn't make sense. Not that we're against dosage and counting hours, but it just didn't make sense for that time frame. So I'd be very hesitant about having like dosage expectations in a policy where it is just not going to make sense in certain counties. I would say if it's a felony supervision, that's going to make a little bit more sense. But for CPO counties, I'd be very hesitant about having that language in there.
Well, and our intent was not to add dosage in there. Our intent was that there would be CBI intervention in those appointments. However, that through whatever you're figuring out with your case planning, that's where you would be doing some interventions. Not that we expect 100 hours or 200 hours, but we wanted to make sure that they're getting intervention, whatever that looks like. It could be your treatment program, right? If they're in.
Yeah, I think you could have it without using the word dosage.
Yeah.
I would
Where
remove
did we have
dosage.
dosage? Where do you?
Up at the top.
It's almost like a lowercase d. There's like a capital D dosage, like, program, if you will, out there. And so I think what you're saying is, it's not the formal dosage, it's informal.
I would stay away from any dosage.
That's fine, because people's minds go to that as well.
Yeah, and we had a lot of conversation about that, about not having dosage in here.
Yeah,
So-
that'd be my preference. Because I know there's been talk about wanting counties to do dosage. It just doesn't make sense in the gross misdemeanor world.
I'm gonna ask a question. I'm also a member of the JR2 group. So I just wanted to first of all say that our three co-chairs that led this effort have done a great job. We have an excellent group. That JRI2 is an excellent group of professionals that have, you talk about your jaw dropping. I mean, the conversations we're having are excellent in this area. My question is, and maybe it's a CSAC question, I hear discussion about taking the framework into some sort of a policy format. Is that what I'm hearing? Because my mind is wondering how's that going to look? Because a lot of the conversations we've had are around agencies being able to apply the framework within the framework, but within their own policy structures to meet, their individual agency resources and practices and innovation and all those things, and not being too prescriptive to say, you must do every one of these things. So is there a vision for how we take this sort of framework and convert it into a statewide policy that can be applied with some autonomy? And I don't know if John or Rhonda or Tracy share that question, but as we go back to our future meetings, that's what we're going to be grappling with. Like, if that's the direction that we're being asked to do. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. See, what's the vision for taking this to a different level? Or is this the framework? Is that what we use? Or do we have a policy that supports the framework, I guess? I don't know. What's it going to look like?
I don't know, maybe this is it's a great question. My question back is does this work need to be integrated with the case planning policy instead? I don't know. It's just an idea.
And I thought I heard Tracy saying that some of the work that you'd be doing would be sort of figuring out, like, is there augmentation to existing policy that needs to happen? Are there pieces that need their own policy? So maybe the framework is the vision, and maybe we're sort of agreeing on a similar vision, and then the pieces that we want to make sure everyone is doing are the policy pieces.
So it could be case plan, it could be something else as well, as what your point is. And how it,
Yeah, this is Tracy. I think that was our goal, is if this is the direction that you are happy with and you want us to proceed, certainly there's going to be sections of this framework that might fit under case planning, and there's already a community supervision policy. So maybe that chart with that goes there. I don't know that we're particularly looking to have a separate standalone policy, right? This is probably going to fit in. A lot of these pieces are going to fit into already existing policy or policy that's in the works. So that would be our next step, is like, where do we plug these all in?
Mm-hmm.
And John and Cami have your hands up. I don't know who was first.
Go ahead, Cami.
Sure, thanks. I was just going to say, I mean, I think that is part of what JRI2 standards group is kind of asking right now to this group too, is what does it look like? Is it just here's a basic framework, or is it a specific policy? And does the policy lay out those very prescriptive things, or does the policy look like, here's the framework, and then also standards mean you abide by the case planning policy, you abide by the risk needs assessment policy, you abide by all these things that we have policies for without necessarily having to rewrite that. I'd had that thought too, that this standards policy has this generic essential services kind of a feel to it that refers to all the other policies that we've had. But I do think in part, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think that is in part kind of what we're asking CSAC members today, is what direction should this go? Generalized like this, or much more specific in a policy form? It's a very difficult group to be part of because of those factors. Like, you don't want to be too prescriptive, because we want to keep innovation and local autonomy and all those things available to people. But we also want people to understand that to provide essential services for community supervision in Minnesota, here's the basics that everybody needs to abide by. And then from that point, you can go above and beyond.
Like, my reaction is the way that the information was presented today felt like a vision for what supervision could be, at least like the base that everybody should be doing. And so, like, I almost even think about, like, if we were to communicate what is community supervision in Minnesota to the public, that vision is what we would communicate to them. And so in some ways, like, I'd love for that vision to be captured somewhere that's not policy in terms, so that we have that sort of common understanding of what the baseline is and what we're all striving towards. And then I think you're also right, Cami, in that the policies are like, what are the baseline standards that everyone has to adhere to in order for us to achieve that vision? Now, every individual agency can even do more than that. but at a minimum, no matter where you are in Minnesota, this is going to be what supervision is. That's me talking. That's not CSAC talking. That's just me. So people can disagree. Anyone can say anything else.
I agree with you, Kelly. But this is where I'm gonna be a little hesitant about wanting to jump in and make this policy, is that we're still doing the LSCMI validation, and depending on what the cutoff scores are, is gonna have a huge impact on what this looks like. And so if the cutoff scores are way lower than we thought they were, and all of a sudden we're gonna have a lot more people that are on high supervision, that are doing case plannings on, and now we have to meet these standards, some of these, meeting clients once a week at a minimum. That's where I'd be a little hesitant about, like, before we jump into this, let's figure out what those cutoff scores are gonna be and what's that gonna look like? How is that gonna look for office makeup? Do we need more staff? Do we need more funding? What are the needs? And we're already putting these training requirements on. I just don't wanna it's great work. I love it. I support it, but I wanna figure out what those cutoff scores are before we're gonna jump in and say, this is what every agency has to do, without knowing what those cutoff scores are. Oh, John, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just going back to some of the concerns we articulated with the case planning policy, I think those could be addressed similarly in writing a policy around this. We covered some of that in some of our bullet points related to case planning of how we'll need to continue to evaluate. I guess my opinion is for this group is that I think we can work on some policy. I think, Cammie's point and Kelly's points were exactly spot on, that I think we can start working on, like you talk about that base and what we just expect. I know there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of vision as part of what we presented today, but there is also some nuts and bolts that we can work on. And Cammie's point about how we can overlap these policies as part of this to make sure that we're pointing people in the direction that we want them to go. So I guess my recommendation would be, I think we can go back to JRI. We can start working towards policy. I think we have a good idea of like we're delineating some things and even our vision here about what the quantity and the base looks like versus kind of this best practices. And I think to, Kevin's point again, I'll just say, I think we articulated some of those concerns, and we would do that when we're writing this policy as well.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
No, great work. This is excellent. Any other feedback, comments? Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, we have 5 minutes left.
I think it goes till 12:30, doesn't it?
Doesn't it go to? Oh, it's 12:30. See, I had the whole meeting time wrong today.
We just shifted
Oh my
30 minutes.
God. Okay.
I think I'm up with the workload study update.
Yes, that's what I was just gonna say.
All right. So update on the workload study. It's exciting to share. What we are headed towards, again, recap for everyone, is a lot of work over the last year has been really working with consultant to work with a lot of different partners. There's a workload design team, there's a leadership team on what are we tracking, how are we going to track it, what is CSAC, the deliverables, right? Like what are we expected to do in policy or by the state and statute? And so tons of subject matter experts from all levels, all over the state and delivery systems have been working hard at creating what is now kicking off in April. So that the update is Evident Change is our consultant that's working with us. And they will, over the next 2 to 3 months, we have over 700 agents that are identified to do this workload study across the state. And supervisors. We have 40 agencies and DOC districts that will be involved in these data collection efforts. And so starting in April, we have trainings, some in person, some online. They start April 6th, and we have all these 700 individuals that will be attending different trainings and there'll also be some open office sessions along the way for people to do some check-ins, some additional support for supervisors on how to support agents in this work as well. There's also going to be some analysis along the way to make sure that we have enough people doing specific work so that the sample size is large enough for so for instance, PSIs is an easy one. If for some reason, as we're going along, we're not having enough PSIs assigned, we may ask for additional people to be identified and or people in the study to add in more PSIs to make sure that that body of work is being captured in the overall study. And so that will happen essentially when supervisors and agents are trained. They will actually start very soon after that doing the data collection. And so they have online smart sheets and being trained on, again, how to measure the time it takes to do individual tasks. And for most people, it will be about a month of capturing that data. Again, up to 2 months if you're doing things like pre-sentence investigations that may take longer than a 4-week period would give you. And so then after that, the evident change group will be taking, of course, all that and starting throughout the summer of doing the analytics and the study behind the data that's collected. So that is where we're at with the workload study. Unless there's questions that you all have or people that may know additional information I did not share. It's pretty remarkable. There's to have 700 agents, and again, in terms of even like size and like from Hennepin to rural, like it really is, I think, a great representation. So many agencies have agents that are volunteering for that. So it's exciting to see. And here's the other thing, like that Evident Change said just this week, I think they're at an 85% rate for people signing up for the training. So you think about like, you're the staff that has never even heard of Evident Change and you get those like emails, please sign up, like they're doing it. So it's, to me, like so much of this is, I think, kudos to the leadership in all of our agencies for understanding how important this work is, how meaningful it's going to be to, hopefully a future funding formula as an example. So I think that's just, it's exciting to me to see that level of engagement for something this important. So
That's exciting. All right, any other questions? Okay, next item on the agenda is we haven't done this in a little while, but we did have a big long list of deliverables. And we haven't taken, Don is always sending out the spreadsheet, but we haven't really gone through it. So Don's going to give us a quick run through of where we're at with things.
All right. I'm looking at deliverable 1, which is statewide supervision standards. The IS.
Are you trying to share?
Oh, I apologize. I forgot to share. Thank you.
It just looked like I thought maybe the screen went out. Thank you.
There we go. Looking at deliverable 1, which is statewide supervision standards. The ISR policy was completed and published June of last year. We did discuss the IPV policy earlier today, and we also had a discussion on the supervision standards, which was expertly done today. Looking at deliverable 2, which is risk and needs assessment tools. LSCMI validation is in process. There is no update this month as there's been some scheduling issues with the risk and needs subcommittee and Dr. Hamilton. They are looking at having an update for us in April.
I'll just add to that most of the analysis has been done, and the risk and needs group has received that information and has been sort of processing it so that they could bring it to us along with policy. What are the implications? Like, he's giving the data, their job is to say, so what are the implications of these findings? So we're hoping that they will be here next month, but they're also, most of the data analysis is done, but the proficiency piece just ended. So they just got that data And I know that they wanted to add that to their total analysis as well.
Thank you. And then the risk and needs policy was approved by this group in December and is currently going through policy approval at the DOC.
Oh, I guess I should have given you one more update there. So all 3 policies were approved by DOC at the February meeting. So the 3 that we put forward have been approved. And I thought I had the effective date, but I don't. So I need to check on that. It's not going to be before July 1. I know that much. But I'm not sure if it's July 1 or if it was later in the year. So I will get that information and make sure that that gets shared with the committee.
Looking at deliverable 3, which is the assessment-driven collaborative case planning. Our case planning policy was approved in November of 2025, and it's one of the policies that Kelly just gave us a briefing on, was approved by the DOC in February. Looking at deliverable 5, which is gender responsive, culturally appropriate, and trauma-informed services. We did have a discussion on this earlier, and we are we'll be getting further information on that as we go on. Deliverable 6 was statewide behavior response grid. That was approved by CSAC in August of 2025. Deliverable 7 is performance indicators for supervision. The DOC is working on that first report, and I don't have any further information on that. The deliverable 8 is statewide training, coaching, and quality assurance systems. A policy was approved by CSAC in August of 2025 regarding this. Deliverable 10 is a plan to eliminate financial penalty for early discharge, and that is dealing with the work study that Molly gave an update on earlier today. And then the other items that we have are proposed state level community supervision advisory board. These are legislative changes that are currently in process, but we have no updates at this time. And then 11B was to review and reassess the workload study, which will be done after the workload study is complete. Pending any questions, that's the updates that I have on the deliverables.
Thank you. Any other business? All right, then public comment. Is there any public comment?
Do you not have anyone online?
All right, then we don't have to second or make a motion, right? Just adjourn. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. 12:07.
It's a good thing risk assessment income.
Yeah.
You drive down
When
to the
we
meeting
think
then?
something, that's our biggest downfall.
I-
We think
I
something will
was
go on and we're
here-
like, no, don't ever say it.